I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to sit down and reflect on the last 12 months and also to look forward to the year ahead. So in terms of last year, were there any particular deals from the first half that stood out for you?
Yeah, for me, I think the sale of ASODs to Better Collective was a particular standout. As you know, we can talk about this because it's in the public domain, but it was quite a significant deal for the region. So 42 million euros, a large part paid in cash on completion. An interesting sector, obviously the software, the iGaming sector, which we are seeing more and more activity in. Some interesting multiples we've seen in that sector as well. But yeah, it was a fantastic deal to be involved in.
It was a great deal and a really, really good one to work on. Were there any particular challenges that stood out for you?
Not so much challenges, but as I mentioned about the purchase price, some of it was also satisfied by some shares being issued to the seller in the buyer. The buyer was dual listed on both the Swedish and Danish NASDAQ. So that did require us to source and obtain some Swedish advice and some Danish advice around that particular aspect. So not a challenge as such, but it's just coordinating that external advice so it fits in with the completion timetable, the completion timeline, and just to ensure that completion is as smooth as possible, which it was in this case.
And as you say, it was a deal in the technology and software sector, which is an area we're seeing more and more activity in. And I think, as you know, when software is the central asset in a deal, it does require a certain level of expertise in intellectual property and software more generally. And I think that's consistent and equipped us well for a deal highlight from the second half of last year, which was acting for the shareholders of Indigo Software in their sale to Aptean Inc., a US buyer. And again, similar to ASODs, another cross-border transaction, which was a really interesting, significant deal for the region. That was obviously around the budget, as you know, and that presented a particularly challenging timeline. But I think, given that we'd acted for Indigo for a certain period of time and offered support across various disciplines, do you think that really gave us a head start going into that deal?
Yeah, that was a massive help. I mean, you're right, the budget was a busy time for everyone. Other advisors that we've spoken to, I think everyone would say it was an exceptionally busy time and a record time for us. But as you say, I think having that existing knowledge was a massive benefit. So we'd acted for Indigo for around 8 years, gone through a couple of MBOs with them as well, and it was a challenging time frame in any event. There were certain challenges around the number of shareholders. Some had different levels of involvement in the business to others. There were some property aspects to be negotiated and resolved, along with the structure of the deal, some negotiations around that. But having that existing knowledge was a huge benefit, particularly around things like the property, for example, was a huge head start in what was a challenging time frame.
And as you know, we tell clients all the time to do their best to prepare for transactions as far ahead in advance to give them the best chance of meeting any challenging timelines and being ready for sale. And as you know, the budget came and went, and we briefly came up for some air, and then were instructed on the sale of Wingrove Motor Group to Arnold Clark, which completed post-budget. And again, that was another example of a very, very long-standing client who we'd supported across various disciplines throughout the firm, from property, employment, corporate, commercial contracts. And again, that timeline became achievable because of the knowledge and the relationship we had with the client. And that's another example, I think, where we've talked about the activity in the technology and software sector, albeit there is still the more traditional sectors that are showing a good level of activity. So the automotive sector is one we've got a really good track record in, and we're seeing a lot of consolidation in that area. And I think that'll be another interesting space to watch. But that Wingrove deal was a really pleasing outcome for a value client, and was a really successful end to what had been, as you say, a really, really strong year for us. And I suppose on that note, if we look ahead to this year, I know it's difficult to make predictions and you're not a betting man, but do you have any particular insight into the year ahead?
Yeah, I mean, so far the activity still looks strong. We've seen no let up since the end of last year. Certainly the pipeline looks strong. It'll be interesting to see what happens around end of March, beginning of April time. as you know, there's some CGT changes coming into force then, and some further ones in 2026. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not those changes do have an impact and either provoke or accelerate certain transactions of a certain value. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Indeed, and I think there is a lot of cause for optimism, as you say. So I think it'll be really interesting to sit down again in a few months' time and reflect on what's been happening in the first quarter of this year. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ben.